And as I said to all of you, this is a conversation, and if you want to share slides, you can. But I thought we'd start with just a little introduction. And since I sent you the intro, I thought it might be useful, instead of just saying you and your business, if you want to have up to 3 minutes on yourselves, and then up to 3 minutes on your organization. Because I think as social entrepreneurs, I'm interested in you as people as well as your organization. So I'm just going to work around my screen and pick on people in that order. So I will start with Sam because you're first on my screen. So do you want to, I'm going to do my timer because sometimes I think 3 minutes sounds really long and it's not. And sometimes it feels shorter. So I will put you on for 3 minutes. And do you want to introduce yourself and how you ended up doing what you do now?
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Sam. I guess I need to just say quickly, so I'm originally from Latvia. I've lived and worked and studied in a few countries across Europe and beyond. I've ended up in UK where I'm very happy. It was a very good choice to take, I think, as well, business-wise. How I ended up being a social entrepreneur, I think subconsciously I've always known I'm going to do a business. I have lots of business ideas, literally almost on a weekly basis. It's a bit difficult sometimes, but I always knew I wanted to do something that's good for the world. So not just something that's like going to make me a millionaire, but actually with an impact on people, environment, the planet, just do something good. Shall I talk about Ministry of Waste?
Okay, go for it.
So just quickly, so I'm the founder and CEO at the moment of Ministry of Waste, which is a resource recovery company trying to build large-scale infrastructure in the developing world. We're starting with Indonesia, and it's been very, very difficult, but I'm sure we'll speak about it more in this panel. Thank you.
Okay, so the next person on my screen is Kim.
Hi everyone, my name is Kim Griffin and I am by training an occupational therapist, and I have spent the last 20 years pretty much supporting children who might have additional needs such as autism or poor coordination or sensory difficulties or differences. And those children find it much more difficult to attend in school, to maybe ride their bike, to maybe hold a pencil, to maybe get dressed. And my job is to help them, their families and their teachers to understand maybe why that is more difficult for them and problem solve solutions to help them be more independent or more engaged in sort of the activities they want, or in some cases at school need to engage with. And I 5 years ago, I made the decision to take my knowledge online, which post-COVID doesn't sound very innovative, but 5 years ago, there was not a lot of online content particularly for teachers or for families on sensory processing or on motor skills. And what was there was very much content that had been recorded maybe at a live presentation and then just put online. So it wasn't designed to be watched online, and if there were tech problems mid-presentation, they were in the video, or if it was, and a lot of them sometimes were like 2 hours long, which I just felt was very difficult to manage when you're just sitting and watching stuff online. So I made the decision to take my knowledge and put it into that sort of small chunks and make it more bespoke to be online. And I really wanted that to be accessible and affordable, because the other thing that was happening at the time I was starting up was that a lot of the training was becoming more expensive. And again, it was also in person, which for some people is very difficult, particularly, teachers find it very difficult to get time off school. Parents can't come to a day's training. They need to get their kids to school at 9, pick them up at 3, or kind of somewhere in that time frame. So they can't just pop to Birmingham or London for a day because it's not sort of a realistic thing. So my goal was to allow them to just dip in and out of the information in a time that was and a place that sort of suited them. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Kim. Super. You're next on my little loop. And Kim's just told me that she told you about Cambridge Social Ventures. So there was a little loop in there that I wasn't aware of. So over to you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, it was many years ago, and I think I got into the Cambridge social innovation and all the great stuff there, trap, in the best kind of way, not a bad trap. So thank you for making this space, and also for asking us to share both our personal and business, because you're absolutely right. As social entrepreneurs, we do what we do because there's something that's burning inside us, and it's a cause that we care about. So my background is I was born and brought up in Saudi Arabia as an expatriate, a Pakistani expatriate, and was very immediately a result of social mobility through education. And that kind of journey of my parents and my grandparents was something that was very close to me. And so when I went to school and saw how firsthand there were so many inequalities when it came to standardized testing, I wanted to do something about it. I did something about it. It was a small website, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. I ended up continuing my schooling, came to university, came to London and studied mathematics at UCL, finished my degree, and along the way came and became an accidental entrepreneur because of that website that I started as a 16-year-old, had gone on to reach millions of students. And today, that's what I do full time. I'm the founder of a social impact startup that is addressing the inequalities in education called Z-Notes, where we empower and bring together students to co-create educational resources and make that accessible over the world, all over the world. And we believe very much in the importance of peer learning and relatability that students bring to each other. And in our efforts, we've reached almost 4 million students globally. That's the backstory and what I do right now.
Brilliant. And finally, Madeleine.
Thank you so much. I also love accidental entrepreneur. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a lot of friendly faces here, so thrilled to be here. My entrepreneurial journey is also, like you guys have said, always from the very beginning, very impact driven. Academically, my background is in sustainable international development, and I was always really fascinated at the intersection between sustainable development goals and financially sustainable business models. After graduating, I started my first company in the impact space, which was called Mamok, and this was a sustainable fashion marketplace that was really big on basically driving consumer awareness about dressing with the same mindfulness that you might eat with when we talk about things like organic versus conventional, or air miles, or where it's come from, that kind of same lens also on our closet. Then COVID happened, and that was quite difficult for us. And so we, I'll keep it brief now, we can go into details, but we wound down Mamok essentially in summer of 2020, and actually spun out another company from Mamok, and that's GreenSpark. And GreenSpark is a B2B SaaS platform that helps e-commerce companies basically create impact as a way to engage their community, strengthen their brand value, and also nudge consumer behavior that they're trying to achieve with their community. I ran that for about a year. I guess what's slightly unusual about me is that both these companies I founded with my partner, and during COVID and starting up another startup from scratch for some personal reasons, I decided that I needed to actually take a step outside of the company. So you will notice that there is a queue behind me, because my day job is an investment manager at an investment boutique in Vienna, running their VC investments. So it's been a nice parallel to kind of be on both sides of the investment raising process, both asking for money and being the one that actually gets to hold the purse strings, which is a unusual, well, as you would agree, a change of pace for when you're out raising money. And today I kind of get to have my cake and eat it too, because I've maintained my connection with GreenSpark. I'm currently the chair of the board and very strategically involved. But during the day, I put on my investor hat, and it works now for me. I think that there are a lot of compromises that I had to make when making this decision, and it was a really difficult decision. But that is now where I am today.
Great, thank you. And when you talk about where you are today as a being, I'm also aware that every single one of us on this panel is currently living in the country that we were not born in, which is I didn't choose entrepreneurs who were kind of travelers as well. And I think that's a really interesting angle to this panel. So you might want to reflect on that. I thought I'm going to go to, rather than picking on the highlights and what you wish you hadn't done, I'm going to go through the same order so we don't ever lose people, because I'd like to hear everybody's voice equally. What would you wish you knew when you started your social entrepreneur journey? So what do you wish someone had told you then that you now know? So Sam.
I find that's a very difficult question. Because I feel like everything I found out has contributed to kind of the journey. And actually, I heard so much already, or I had, seen lots of YouTube videos a long time ago when they were kind of scarce and there was not a lot out of there, that it's going to be very, very hard. And I did in my, I'm, some entrepreneurs say, oh, I did not know it's going to be so hard. I knew it's going to be really, really hard. But I still feel like I still caught me like 10% more hard than maybe what I expected. So maybe really emphasizing how hard it's going to be and how long, and maybe not being too naive about, or if someone would have said, this will change a lot of your relationships with people. It will change a lot of your life, and it's part of the journey, and it's something that you almost need to experience. But yeah, I don't think I anticipated, because I think if I look 5 years ago, my friend circle and what it is now, it's very different. I still love those friends, but like you say you need to have like the 5 people around you will be the people that will impact you most. So I had to change it in order to get where I'm today. So yeah, maybe that's so. It's going to be even harder than you thought how hard it might be, and that it will change your life and your relationships with people quite drastically over the time. So that would be my 2 things probably.
Okay. And we'll come back to relationships, but Kim, what do you wish you knew when you started?
One thing I was incredibly naive about was creation of audience. So I think no, I don't think, I know that having more understanding of just that kind of piece of, rather than having the product and no one to sell it to, that you sort of have to have that, both those things happening at the same time, in terms of putting the energy and the time into creating the audience, so that then when you have got your content, it's you've got people to essentially talk to. That I think is one thing that would have helped me earlier on to sort of get more people purchasing and kind of growing, just having people to sell to, really. And I did learn that, and I read stuff on that, but it certainly would have been helpful to have kind of considered that more, given more weight to that, let's say, when I first started, rather than kind of knowing that theoretically it's a thing. So I think that would have been helpful. Sam, you said something that was really good, and I forgot what it was right at the beginning, just in terms of sort of knowing, it is much. I was probably naive in terms of how it's interesting. You said you knew how hard it was going to be. I was definitely naive in terms of how difficult it would be to generate sales. Like I have so much sort of interest and activity on my free content, but it's just that piece of, okay, that's great, but you can only well, my experience is you can only kind of run so long on blood, sweat, and tears before you're kind of looking at it going like, I kind of need to, you know, pay my mortgage. I kind of, there's this piece of time that's yeah, like in terms of just that piece of actually it is really hard. And I think even when you kind of read that and you're told that until you're in it, it's probably like parenthood. I don't have children, but like most people would say that like you don't know until you've got a kid just like the change that makes to life. The other thing I got told a couple of years in, which was a really helpful piece of advice, and it was from someone who had a lot of experience in education and education startup, had made her own education startup, and made her was also actually in a similar role to what Madeline's doing now in terms of managing VC investment. And she very much said that education's a very different space. So a lot of the kind of standard advice for tech or the standard advice for kind of business doesn't necessarily apply in education, because it just schools work in a very different way to many other businesses. So that was a very helpful conversation, which if I'd had 2 years earlier, I think would have been very helpful for me to have sort of maybe a bit more confidence in why things were so difficult, because they are actually difficult. Yeah, and what advice to kind of ignore because it was not as relevant as maybe I put the weight to. Yeah, I'll hand over. I feel like I'm starting to ramble.
I think that's a really interesting precursor to Zubair, because you're also in the education space, but in a slightly different angle. And so what would you wish you'd known when you started? And do we kind of split when you started into, well, you put this website out there, and then at some point you turned it into, actually it's more than just this little website?
Yeah, very interesting points raised by everyone. Really, really interested by the relationships piece as well. I can definitely see how that's a big part of what I'm going through right now, or have gone in the last few months. Forgive me, I'll be a little bit philosophical, but I would say just knowing that you don't know everything, and even at this moment of time, being very, very conscious of the lack of knowledge that I have for many things that I need to know now, is just this kind of the sensitivity to it is very, very important. When I first kind of went into this, into kind of taking Xenos to the next level, I remember a big part of trying to take it further was, having more support and resources. And so I had my first set of team members joining me, and my approach was that I needed to be the all-knowing, I needed to be the autocratic leader, I needed to be, able to kind of direct and get stuff done. And I think that was a big mistake for me. And in many ways, that was a mistake that I had to learn from, because otherwise I wouldn't be the type of person I am today. But being just very open to the fact that, there are, education is a different kind of beast of its own in terms of ed tech and stuff, but every business is very, very unique. Every business requires a different kind of viewpoint, perception, and kind of the nuances are so unique to each of them, because each of us are very unique, and we bring that as founders to the business. So I have learned to become good at being helped. So you need to be helpful. You need to help others help you. I think that's something I've learned, and just be very authentic and honest about what you don't know. And when I go into these rooms, I'm often surrounded by people who are incredibly intelligent, much, much more experienced, often double, triple my age. And yet I sit there and glean every piece of knowledge like a sponge. And that's just because I know that there are so many things that I'm going to have to learn as I go through this journey. So apologies if I didn't answer your question directly. It's almost like just realizing that you're always on this journey, and even answering the question right now, even a few days later, it will change very, very rapidly.
All right, good. Thank you very much. Madeline, I saw you nodding with the previous three, and I know, because I've had conversations with all four of you, that a lot of what you all think echoes each other. So don't feel like you can't repeat it, Madeline, if there are things which you want to repeat.
They definitely are, but I feel like I could write a book on things that I wish I had known. So I'll go for some novelty here, but that's not because I do 100% agree with everything that you guys said. But what I did jot down is two things that I find myself saying a lot to other startups now in my role as an investor. And the two kind of like isms that I say quite a bit are, don't fall into the trap of if you build it, they will come. And I think this kind of echoes what Kim is also saying, this idea of, especially when we're talking about really early startups, like you're about to get your MVP out. I remember how long we worked on our first iteration of the Momog platform, only to change it like 50 million times after. But like, we're gonna delay it another week because this isn't just so, and this isn't right. And so it's just like putting it out there and getting the traction, even if it's not perfect. And two, don't invest so many resources into building something under the assumption that once you build it, people will come. You have to do your market research to make sure that what you're putting your resources into is something that people are actually going to use and want to use and will pay to use it, depending on what your business model is. But so that's the big one. And on a side note of that, which is a bit more operational, again, talking about early stages of MVPs, we made the terrible mistake of spending far too much money on outsourcing our dev for the first platform. And I would not suggest that to anyone, especially, you know, this is almost like, wow, almost 10 years ago, not quite, but a minute ago. And it is, there's so many advancements in like no code that you can use to get your MVP out yourself and start getting that feedback. And it's all interrelated to what we're saying, you know, just get out there, go, learn, iterate, get the traction. Don't wait for it to be perfect. And don't spend a bunch of money for someone else to build it for you, because then also you can't iterate. So let's say, like for instance, with Momog, we would realize we wanted to change something, and then we'd have to think, okay, well, what's the cost benefit analysis of bringing in the devs again to change it? And it's so expensive that you're really limited in iterating. And what you want to be doing at the beginning is constantly optimizing. So better to do something a little less feature rich to get that initial traction, then go straight for kind of gold star quality, let's say. So that's my first one. And then my second one, sorry, and now I'm rambling as well, but my second one is again on the investor side. But this is something that I was actually told way at the beginning, 7 years ago, that investors don't invest into dots, they invest into lines. And we were told this by who happened to be the entrepreneur in residence at King's College London at the time. He said, we went to him as part of we reached out, used our network. That's a big thing. Use your network. We had already been graduated from King's for a year. We reached out to figure out who was there, who we could talk to. He said, you guys have an idea, not a business. Come back when you have a business. We went to Cambridge for a year. We met Karen. We grew the business. We got traction. We came back. We said, here's our business. He said, you guys have a business, but it's not interesting for me. Come back when you have a business that's interesting for me. Well, as I said, we opened up GreenSpark, and now he's one of our principal investors. So he is the one that said investors invest into lines, not dots. And it's this element of, you know, a no today is not a no tomorrow. And social capital is something that you build and cultivate. And I even feel kind of crass calling it social capital, like it's a commodity. It's not. It's like your relationships, it's your champions, it's the people that you go to for advice. So use that and put yourself out there and ask and start creating those lines. So those would be my two things. And then just on an asterisk on that last one, because I'm actually not done, is that also, now that I'm an investor, sometimes investors don't know what they're talking about. So also trust your own judgment. Like when you're going and you're asking for advice and someone's like, oh, this is a really cool space, but actually you need to be pushing it here, you need to do that. Take a minute back, trust your gut, because you know your business, you know your space very well. Get a second opinion, ask other people, and remember that investors, like, we might put them on a pedestal because they're the ones that can give us money, but not all of them are going to actually give you good advice. So check it. And now I'm definitely done.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madeline. I'm going to have one more question for each of you, and then I'm just giving you the heads up because I think it would be really great if each of you gets a chance to ask a question to everybody else, partly either to unpick a generic issue or actually ask a direct question around their businesses, because I know that all four of you are interested in what other people are doing. So my next question is sort of leading off that sort of, all of you've mentioned how difficult it was, and we certainly called this panel It Is Hard, because all of you had said something to me in the last month about how difficult it is, and how if you had a platform to share how difficult it was to actually do what you do, you would want to do that. I think, Madeline, you shared this much longer ago than last month. But Sam, what is the most difficult? So that's not the same as what do you wish you knew? And you said you knew it was hard, but you didn't realize how hard it is. What is so hard?
There's so many things that are hard.
Pick two. Let's go with two.
1, 2, 3. I think, and obviously this is personal because it's my experience. I'm sure everyone else has their own experiences. For me, the hard part, especially like you know as well in the last few months, is how long you can go. And you always, and like that's the bit that I think I've now made a decision on. But when do you stop? When do you say, you know, I've tried enough, I've did my best, and it just isn't. And it's really weird because this odd thing about entrepreneurship, it's like a roller coaster constantly. And even in those really, really bad weeks, you end up having like a really good day. And for example, today has been a very good day where my co-founder is saying, oh, actually, we have like 3 other companies that want to do partnerships with us. The only little asterisk, you know, is, well, it will just take some time to develop those. And for me, like I had to sit with myself and have almost like a cathartic experience where I was, okay, I cannot keep on going. And I cannot rely on that one day a week of that good thing in a roller coaster, because similar to Kim, like I now need to pay mortgage. I have a partner, I have, you know, a life, I have commitments, and I can't keep on just, oh, but next week is gonna, you know, something's gonna happen. It's gonna be a good week. And the hard bit is now, I feel like, and I literally just before this call talked to my partner about this, not my co-founder, my life partner, where I said to him, I almost feel like I'm stepping down as a CEO, and so I'm leaving the company. My co-founder has so much more energy. He's just come on board a year ago. I've been doing this for 5 years, so I'm really like at the end of my energy. And he like has that energy to continue, and I want him to, and this is amazing. But I literally said to my partner, I feel like I'm gonna step down, and in a few months he's gonna be like, got the investment, got all the partnerships, off we go. And actually it was an interesting moment where my partner was like, and how like would you feel about it? And I'm like, I actually feel completely fine about it, and I wouldn't be like, oh, can I come back on board? Because I made peace about it with myself, and I said, okay, I think it's time to turn a page for myself. So that's been very, very hard. The when do you call quits? And then everything that comes with it, like the guilt, the embarrassment, the fail con, all of that I'm about to experience. And I'm feeling a lot of those emotions, you know, feeling like I'm completely failed. And Karen, you know, we talked about this, and I said, oh, just feeling like I'm disappointing so many people that poured so much energy and effort into me and the company. So that's the feeling of failing other people. I think that's my hard bit, even though if the company would continue. And the other hard bit, I'm just going to come back again to the relationship piece for me. And it was, again, a very cathartic conversation with my co-founder where I talked about that actually the value of the company is not so much the money you put in or like necessarily the time that you spent on building it. It's about the compromises you made on not experiencing life how everybody else does for that time. And for me, that's been 5 years. So no weekends, no parties, not seeing my family and friends, and losing a lot of relationships, feeling like I've failed those relationships on top. that's the hard piece of saying, actually, all of that investment, it's not about the money. It's about, yeah, the evenings I didn't go out with my girlfriends, and the weekends I haven't spent with my nephews, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd say those are the two hard bits for me.
Wow. Thank you.
Don't want to put it on a very depressing note. I'm
But I
still
also
smiling.
think you are still smiling, but we know what strengths you have as to why you're still smiling, Sam. But I also think, although you're taking that check-in now when you're stepping away, I have that conversation with people when they're going, maybe I want to sell it, or maybe I want some kind of recognition for all those things. And I had one person say, but I missed these 5 or 6 years of my children's lives, and you're telling me that's not worth £1 million. I'm going, no, because your value of your business is not based on the amount of hours. It's based on your turnover and your profit. And so it's hard.
Yeah, 100%. And I know as well that me stepping down doesn't mean that actually, you know, I obviously wish so much that my co-founder succeeds, and, you know, whoever joins the team, etc. I want this to succeed without me. And it would make me sad if they wouldn't, not just because then it wouldn't recognize all the energy that we all put in it. But
And you're keeping
like
your shares, though. You're keeping your shares.
I am keeping my shares.
So you're not completely separate.
No, I'm not like, oh, goodbye, I'll give it all away. No, that's the bit of, well, I hope some kind of recognition comes at least. And if not, then we close the shop, and then, you know, we at least did our best. And it's several people. It's not just me doing my best. It's more than me. So, yeah.
Okay. That sounds not only difficult for you, but difficult decisions. And Kim, what is so hard for you?
I listen to Sam and I know exactly, like, all of those feelings, just that they all resonate. I would say I have put an awful lot of time in, but I valued a lot of that because I was learning. One of my second strength is learner. So, like, there were periods there where I was really enjoying it, and I was getting that fulfillment because I was learning. But I hit a real kind of slump when I was no longer learning anymore, and it was just becoming that kind of rudimentary, sitting at the front of the computer by myself, putting in hours and not really getting what I feel like. You know, it feels like sometimes I'm putting in hours into a black hole. Yeah, and then occasionally you get a wonderful email from someone saying, like, oh, this really helped, or that was amazing, or like, I'm using this. You know, I've had an email today from a school that's like, we're loving it, the teachers find it really helpful, I'd like to get 5 more. Like, so there are elements in there, but sometimes there are weeks where there's just not that piece. So I also made the decision to sort of step back the end of this year, really, because I'd taken, just personally, I spent 6 months at home supporting my parents to do kind of aging without preparation. So I wasn't sort of earning. So for this, when I got back to the UK in April, I've not had much of an income for 6 months. So that kind of has made me have to kind of refocus on some face-to-face work, because I never, until that point, had really taken my finger out of doing consulting. I'd always consulted or worked a few times a week. So my mortgage was covered. Whereas when I got back in April, it was kind of like, okay, well, I need to sort of look at things slightly differently. And I made the decision that for the rest of the year, I'd just let things kind of, I'm certainly not closing it down because it's all online, so it's still just potters along in the background, but that I wasn't going to put the same level of time into it as to what I had been previously. But I'm confident with that decision, and I feel like I will get back to it. Like, I know I will get back to it, but I'm just at a different point in my life needs at the moment, I suppose. And I was starting to feel quite resentful, and I don't want to feel resentful about kind of putting the time in. So yeah, I think that's the question answered, but I've now forgotten the question. So
It was what was so hard, and I definitely think you've answered the question.
Yeah.
I think listening to both of you talk about it, even though Sam, you've got people with you, and I know Kim, you've got some directors on board. I think Zubair, you've always been mobilizing more people, so maybe the sense of being alone hasn't been so much, but in the end it has been you carrying it. So maybe I'm anticipating what was hard for you, but what do you find hard?
Yeah, definitely feeling that point about responsibility and having so many people contribute. I'm very much responsible for, you know, not just my hours, but tens of thousands of volunteer hours from hundreds of people. And so that's heavy. And an organization at the stage that we're at and the number of people that we serve, there's a responsibility on just continuing to do what we do, and even continue to do what we do is much more than in a full day's week, for sure. But I wanted to come at this from a different angle in terms of I'm lucky in some ways that I started at quite a young age, and so have a very, you know, even now I have a very different kind of level of risk appetite and ability to kind of do things in certain ways, which, you know, live like a student while I still at this stage and kind of making my way through in different ways, has meant that I'm pushing myself as far as possible, with the kind of the space that I have. But one thing that is always hard / kind of made me feel, frustrates me quite a lot, is when I first came into kind of thinking about this from an entrepreneurial perspective, social enterprises or social impact startups or, you know, impact or purpose-driven organizations were far and few beyond. There were those that were so big and they could continue what they wanted to do, or there were smaller ones that never really kind of gave impact to the pedestal that it deserves. In the last year or two since the pandemic, we're seeing social impact being a trendy word. I was at a panel yesterday, and the lady mentioned that you know, in terms of PR, the next big thing is ESG and impact, and that frustrates me. You know, the fact that a lot of people, a lot of organizations, investors are going to jump on this kind of bandwagon, and I think more people working towards purpose and social impact is necessary, but I also think that it's getting crowded, and cutting through the noise to talk about what you do is really hard. So when I first walked into my kind of UCL's kind of innovation enterprise department, I found it really challenging and difficult to explain to anyone that I was building something because I wanted to see and impact as many people as possible. It just, you know, it was not a SaaS. It didn't have a hockey stick curve graph and revenue generation. So what is Zubair doing, and why is he doing what he's doing? So as social entrepreneurs, I think the lack of acceptance as a kind of a typical startup, but then also still competing with that startup culture, you know, the hustler mentality, the fact that there are startups or peers that are raising funds at much higher valuations than then is fair, maybe one would say, or, you know, for different reasons. That just it's been difficult seeing that. But at the same time, and I don't want to leave it at a negative note, and I just want to kind of keep balancing these two dualities, I guess, is that although it's been really difficult to cut yourself out, choose to not be branded as a certain startup, even though I could have chosen not to take certain VC checks, even though I could have, also means that you start to kind of really learn about yourself and strengthen your value system. All of the journeys that each of you have spoken about has also made you resilient as human beings. And whether it's a company that is still with you or not, you're still taking that journey with you. That experience is going to be baked into you, and it's going to affect, you know, whether it's personal things, future other enterprises or endeavors that you pursue. These characteristics are very much within you. And the people I found some incredible people. I found people working on different social problems, and people who are really so, you know, authentic and vulnerable and care about the kind of the world in a globally prosperous way. And so it gives you hope, it keeps you motivated. So regardless of whether the enterprise or social impact startup that you're working on in this tiny kind of bubble or in this is still giving you kind of the kind of the motivation to continue doing what you do, whether it's through that startup or not, is regardless. Hope that kind of gives you a little bit of a flavor of both the good and the bad.
Thank you. Madeline, what I'm aware of is how each of you has a slightly different angle on this. And since I first started to think about this panel, each of you have been on journeys. Each of you have reflected on things even in the last week or so. So Madeline, what would you say has been the hardest? Why is it difficult?
Well, I guess I would say listening to all of you all speak, because I definitely resonate with and can relate to a lot being said. But I guess one point I would make is to decouple it being hard with success. Because even when you're succeeding, it's still super hard. And so that, I think, is what is so hard, because maybe when you're starting and you're grinding and you're hustling, you're like, okay, well, as soon as I get over this cliff or this mountain, then I can breathe. And as soon as I close this round, or as soon as I do this, and there will always be another mountain. So even when you're succeeding and thriving, it's exhausting and difficult and relentless, while simultaneously being exhilarating and incredible. And that is just exhausting, and that is what's hard. But it's irregardless of really whether things are going well, for me at least.
And that echoes one of the entrepreneurs who I worked with actually longer than all of you, who has grown her business hugely. And we did have a moment in time when she was actually looking at it might have folded, and then she grew it. So she has a really large team, and she has a huge global reach, and she's generating a lot of turnover. I suspect she will be one of the first social enterprise unicorns. And even that was hard, because she was looking at one point to sell part of her business, and she had the same challenges that you've talked about, Zubair, where it's like, well, I'm not going to sell out. You know, if you want to invest, then you have to invest in the wholeness of the impact. And she said to me, what's hard is that you can't stand still, and in order to stand still, you have to grow. And that is hard with business. It's not just startup. It's just keeping level in a business requires growth, because every single year you need more just to stay in the same place. So now, because we're actually halfway through, it's a perfect time to say, what questions would you like to ask each other? So I'm going to start with you, Sam, and you can ask the same question to Kim, Zubair, and Madeline, or you can choose a different question for each of them.
You put me on the spot. I haven't thought, like, I probably have so much to ask. If anyone has already a question, please raise your hand. Give me a moment to think.
Laura already has a question. Shall I give you Laura's question from the audience?
Yes, I saw. Go for it.
Okay, she said she's hit a dip in motivation recently. What's your advice for getting through the dip? Can
I answer first? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, and then everybody else says, I'll think of my question. For me, the best, whenever I had the big dips and it was really hard, and that maybe is my personality, I always seeked out people in the space, or this is why I joined Cambridge Ventures. This is why I did other networking events, etc., because it did recharge my battery and gave me back hope. And having them surround yourself with the people that understand what you're doing, because I found that one of the reasons for the dips is as well because you kind of have no one to say this, like what you're actually struggling with, or not a lot of people that understand what you're struggling with. So the Cambridge Social Ventures gave me the opportunity of having similar people that if I called them and I just said, I'm having a really bad week, like, can we just have, a cup of tea and a chat? And I would always come back from that so much stronger and so much more positive, because they would say, oh, but you're not seeing this side, and have you thought about that? And if you are open-minded and you actually don't mind people throwing ideas at you, it definitely can re-energize and find that motivation. That always worked for me. So that's just a little tip as an option.
And Kim, what would you say to Laura?
A big hello. And it's great to have you here. Thank you for being our audience member. I would say two things. Firstly, and this is something technically Karen made me start to do, but not like formally, but I made it more formal, is I do a reflection on the things that, like the wins. So even the small wins, I sit down, because I think it's very easy when you're in that space to get caught up in how just stuff's not working, or how tired you are, or how, yeah, you're just like, ugh. And I find it helpful sometimes to just sit down and do that list of just, actually, these are the achievements. This is what's really worked. These were some great moments. And I know you've had some pretty fantastic moments with We Speak. So there's moments that would go on. There's some big moments that would go on that list, like some of your funding, and then there's much more smaller ones, even like just, yeah, there's lots of small ones there as well, which I think I'm a doer. So I just keep on my treadmill of doing, and I don't necessarily go back and stop and go, oh yeah, actually, like you said, oh no, it was when we were backstage, you've got champagne in the fridge, Sam, for when something's done. Like it's rather than it being a big thing, like, oh, actually, I just got that, I got that newsletter sent out. Awesome. Like, it's a small thing, but it was something you needed to do. And the second thing I found helpful is just sometimes taking a step out, just to, and even if that's taking a week off, going hiking, doing some yoga, or doing whatever what you love to do, just to really re-energize, because I think we can be very bad at taking time off. I am very bad at taking time off, but I know most people I speak to are, I know, Madeline, you've got a story of kind of being so sick that, like, you just you hadn't taken time off and you were not at all well, but you just kept going. So yeah, sometimes that time off can just reignite that spark. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Kim. So Zubair, what advice would you give Laura?
Yeah, and actually this was going to be one of my questions for the whole panel as well, but I'll answer it. And yeah, maybe like I'd love to hear from the others. I think it's been very important for me to ensure that I had a life outside Zenotes. And I have a lot of hobbies, and my sister calls me a hobbyist because every time I do something new, I associate myself to it. So I'm a runner, I'm a figure skater, so I have a lot of different things that I associate myself. And I think it's partially because I want to really, I strive to doing that sport or that activity in its wholeness. So I'm a big advocate for someone. And okay, so first of all, I believe this kind of work-life balance philosophy, ideology stuff is quite difficult, especially as an entrepreneur. Your work is your life is your work. Your people that you meet are intrinsically like connected to what you do, and it just kind of encroaches with everything. So that's why I really encourage entrepreneurs to develop their kind of their lifestyle with healthy habits, so that it makes sure that it keeps them in check and ensures you have avenues to kind of let off the steam and be creative and be bold and get energized again. I have never been a fan of the hustler mentality. I don't think the number of hours you clock in at WeWork is the kind of the mentality you need to go with. I think I've always done more work in less time. It's like the least amount of time has been. So as a very, very current example, I had a lot of stuff to do. I'm in between different meetings in London, and in the middle of the day, this afternoon at midday, instead of replying to the 3 emails that were coming in, chat messages that were coming to me, I instead left my phone, took my Garmin, and went out to rollerblade for a couple hours and run in the forest, come back, had a great lunch, and then got back to whatever I needed to do. And I know I'll be able to catch up with the things that I missed out on that 1 or 2 hours, but it's the middle of the prime hours of the day I've spent out skating and running around. And I will never change that, because that is very much that well-being and, kind of those avenues, the kind of creativity it brings to me, the fact that I'm completely decoupled from everything else. There's no notification buzzing away at me. The fact that I'm immersed in my music, those are things that I value a lot, and I know that those will value my business as well, and my endeavors. So I think this kind of like getting out of this mindset that we've all been put into, this productivity, the number of hours we do, to the kind of things we can achieve, and really just kind of leaning into and being sensitive to what your body needs, what you need, ensuring you get good sleep, read extensively, read fiction, get excited, stay creative, make sure you move well, make sure it's the exercises that you enjoy doing, and eat well as well. I think we tend to forget about our nutrition. I'm sorry, I am snacking away on a granola bar because my nutritionist is letting me know about this as well. But just remember that these 3 key principles, that if you're not healthy and well and fully energized, you're not going to be good for your business either.
And Laura, I'm just warning you and Sade so that we can let you speak too, because I think all of these will resonate with you, because you, through personal circumstances, have had to really look after yourself a lot. So once Madeline's suggested how she would answer your question about how you get through those low times, Sade, if you can line up letting Laura speak and respond. So Madeline.
Yes, completely agree. In fact, I wish that someone had told me that in the beginning, because I think that there is this like hustler mentality of you just have to go and you just have to put in the hours. And if you're not working until 2 a.m. or you even trying your hardest, and that is such a fail, and something that I've learned through years of that, doing it. And yeah, Kim, you had mentioned, it's funny, like I kind of blocked that out, but actually I sent myself to the hospital because and the doctor said it was because there was just, I had an infection, but I had so much adrenaline and cortisol that I just like wasn't letting my body have a fever, and then doesn't even matter. But it's so not healthy and it's so not productive. And now I totally subscribe to this like second school of thought, which is like listening to your body, like not trying to jam a square peg into a round hole, you know, like if you're working on something and you're rubbing your eyes and you're not getting it, like don't get frustrated at the computer. Change your scenery, get out of yourself, come back with fresh eyes, fresh perspective the next day. So I think that, yeah, as you guys said, listening to your body and carving time out for yourself is the most important thing. And like, I know it's a cliche to recommend yoga in the evenings, but that was really transformational for me, especially because I ran my first business with my partner, my personal partner. We co-founded it together, and it just meant that there was like no time that wasn't like in the office. Even at home felt like the office. And so I started basically implementing like, okay, whenever it is that I finished, whether it was at 7 o'clock or 1 a.m. or whatever, I was going to do 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour of yoga. And after that, like that was the shop closed. Like don't like email me and I'll look at it tomorrow, but I'm not here to tackle that problem in the middle of the night, so that I could kind of protect myself and have that space. And I think that it's, you know, all good ideas come, not all good ideas, but you know how good ideas come in the shower. It's like when you give yourself that freedom to not be stressing about thinking it, that then actually maybe a solution just pops into your head. It's not always as easy as that, but I do think that distance and self-care is like the sustainable remedy for being able to maintain the business and yourself.
If I can add,
oh, okay,
just to add, I hate the whole hustler culture. Like we need to stop. Like we need to stop. Like you're all making the same points.
But also, I'd like to point out to all of you, because you would all have heard this, including you, Zubair. Belinda Bell has always said you don't have to hustle to be an entrepreneur, and she's always said that all her startups she's worked 4 days, not 5. So we were all told that at the beginning. Laura, what do you think, and what's your reflection on what's hard? And I do like the fact, Madeline, that you're saying what's hard doesn't equal failure. You know, this isn't a panel about failure. This is a panel about it's hard. It doesn't mean you're not doing it. So Laura.
Thank you so much for answering those questions. Oh, I've got my video.
No,
okay,
because
right.
you're in the audience.
Oh, perfect. That's fine. Yeah, no, it's so nice to hear your answers, because I am definitely in that kind of real dip zone at the moment, and just hearing, like, thanks Kim for saying about the got some good achievements with We Speak. Even just hearing that makes me feel like, yeah, maybe I do. Makes me feel a bit more motivated. But it's also interesting in terms of my ways of getting through the dips. I think are really, really bad. Like, I just think all my bad habits just all come out in one go. Like, instead of doing, those really good ideas around, getting good sleep and reading extensively and being creative and doing really good things, I do exactly the opposite. I do less movement. I sit on the sofa and eat chocolate. And do you know what I mean? And I feel like that is really bad for me, particularly because, like, I've got a chronic health condition, so it does mean that I get my energy levels are low, and I just keep drifting into those bad habits. And I know that it's probably not good for me, and ultimately not for the business either. So I think I'm really, really pleased to hear all these other ways to deal with those dips. Think about what's hard. Oh, I don't know. Everything feels hard at the moment. I think I'm just in that kind of zone where I've been working so hard for such a long time, and you start to lose sight a little bit of why you're doing things. And I actually had a quite good chat today with some other social entrepreneurs, and we talked about how you can sort of re-engage with the things that made you want to do it in the first place, and that has helped. Thinking about the purpose. I think once I look at the purpose, then that helps a lot. But it just all feels a bit hard. It's just, I think it's the volume of things and the different things, and also doing the things that you're really not very good at. Like, I am so bad at some things, like accounts and, keeping detailed records of things. And I just, I think they mentally drain me more, I think, than doing some other things. So, yeah. That's my view on it, I think.
Thanks, Laura. So, Sam, you kind of skated out of that one. What's your question for the rest of the panel?
Do we have time? I'm just thinking.
So we've got it till 5:30.
Okay, so if anyone does need to run away, they can. Okay,
Including you.
Including me. Yeah, I might have to depart my 15 minutes. I can hear my partner singing, making dinner, so I might have to leave. But yeah, to quickly, I thought about myself and just how throughout this 5-year journey, I've had a few very, very good supporting people. So my question to you would be, who were your, I don't know, one or two top most supportive people, and why do you nominate those people to be your most supportive people?
Starting with Kim.
I definitely will say Cambridge Social Ventures. So Karen and Mark and that crew were really just, I mean, everyone may have that answer, and I know it's the easy answer, but they just brought a really helpful, fresh perspective to things, which I found incredibly valuable. And I have a friend, Ruth, who I just can natter about anything with, and she always just checks in, and there's no pressure on that conversation. It's just a nice check-in, and I value that. And shout out to Laura. We've had some pretty cool conversations about challenges and positive things as well.
We have.
Great. Thanks, Kim. So Bear.
Yeah, I have an interesting story for this one. And the reason why I got brought into Cambridge ecosystem in the first place was because of an email that went into my spam. It was from someone named Tom Cassidy, and he was a principal of a school and wanted to start a new school in Cambridge. And he sent me an email saying, "Hey, my students are using your platform, and we'd love to learn more about what you're doing, etc." And a couple Skype calls later, I'd only finished my first year of uni. I packed my bags and was on a plane to Cambridge, and he lived in a tiny village in Norfolk. So here I am who's never seen anything more than like central London, is now being driven around in country lanes with this strange man I've never met in my life except for an email. And yet Tom is probably one of my closest mentors, friends, advisors, and you know, I value a lot the relationship that he and the kind of what he's given to me in kind of helping me grow personally, and as well as kind of helping me view Zenotes as more of an enterprise or startup than I had ever imagined. And so it's people like this that I always refer to, that the ones that have contributed most to Zenotes or my social impact startup are actually people who've contributed most to me in a personal level. So regardless of whether it was as a social enterprise or not behind me, it's the skills that I've developed, the ability to, you know, share a story, the ability to stand up and present myself, the ability to articulate, and, you know, all these kind of really key skills which I will take wherever I end up going. So Tom's definitely one of them. He's actually one of my directors and my advisory board member as well in my foundation. And then the other person is my mom, someone who in a kind of a postmodern society will be looked out as a housewife who's, you know, maybe not done a lot in terms of the traditional corporate structures and ladders and all these kind of things, but I think she has the hardest job of being my mom and all the difficulties that come with it, and for being someone who's really just, you know, regardless of whether she knows what I'm doing in my life or not, to have such a strong support system, you know, an emotional you know, walls. I'm not exactly sure how best to metaphorize it, but, you know, that is very, very important, and I wouldn't be here whether with my startup or anything else in life without her. So those are my two people.
Thank you. And Madeline.
That's really sweet. I mean, I feel really lucky that I have a really vast support system, like beyond lucky. And I think it's hard to narrow it down, because I think what you guys have also touched upon is kind of getting a diversity of support, in the sense that, like, I firmly believe that one person cannot give you everything, and that you need to understand what you need and create that around you, and not put all that pressure on a partner or a child or a sibling, whatever it is. So I think that I definitely would say having people to lean on, that one can sympathize with you in a way that maybe they've gone through something similar, and then maybe someone that has zero idea and is just like, forget it, sod it, you don't even need to worry about it, like, let's talk about something else. Like, I think that there's some value in basically finding different types of people that you can lean on during different challenges, and also victories and celebrations. And so I'll say that as my answer. So instead of two specific people, I'll say someone who's kind of in it and someone that's kind of out of it would be the two. But before I go, I just also wanted to say about Laura, you had mentioned like coping and chocolate bars and sitting on the couch. And I wanted to also comment on that and say that, like, everything in moderation is totally fine. If you want to eat a chocolate bar on the couch and not think about anything, but as someone that also would sometimes cope by exhibiting like extreme avoidance behavior, and just like sometimes sitting on the couch is the thing that you want to do because it's completely distracting, because you can like numb and not think about anything. So maybe looking at something that you can do that takes 100% of your brain power, that is more productive or more positive. And for me, that's puzzling. So that's just a shout out to puzzles, but also just to say that everyone has different things that they do, and it's just about finding what works for you, but no shame in needing to take a minute for yourself to not think about anything at all.
Thank you so much, Madeline. I really appreciate that.
Okay, so Kim, what would your question be for the panel?
I think I'd figured that out by now because I've had enough time. I would actually like to ask, and Zuba's touched on this already, just how you have, what's the word, not balanced, how you have made peace with the work-life balance bit, in terms of, like, for many years I tried to have like days off and things like that, but I've personally made peace with the fact that, you know what, I probably will spend an hour or so doing something, but I have got this other stuff booked in the afternoon where I'm not touching it, and I'm not going to take other people's grief around like, you should have a day off, it's the weekend. It's like, well, that's fine, except I feel a lot better if I spend this, like, my weekend is much more enjoyable if I've spent this hour getting this piece of work out of my head, and then I can have my time. And I also, like, I happily will book my hairdresser at Tuesday afternoon or things like that, like Zuba was saying about going out and yeah, going rollerblading like for lunch and having a nice lunch. So I just would like other examples on kind of how you have made peace with the alternative kind of where it's 8 p.m. in the evening, we're on a panel, so there's that piece in terms of it can be never ending, and how you kind of make peace with that.
So I'm going to keep in the cycle. So that means, Zubair, you're first, and I'm sure going to the hairdresser on a Tuesday is going to be one of your answers.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I think I might be reiterating, and forgive me if I am, but I have to come back to just being sensitive, like really, really listening to yourself. Our bodies are telling us exactly what they want. We're so desensitized to it so often. We just are not even. It's just funny when you realize, times when you're hungry, or times when you're sleepy, and times when you're not feeling like you want to write this beautiful article because it's required for this thing, but you just want to do so. And just realizing that there's I'm lucky, and I'm grateful for this very much, that I have a diversity of things that I need to do, and I wear a couple of hats. I have a lot of in-person engagements and kind of things that I do. There's a lot of kind of operational related things that I do, a lot of creative stuff, a lot of and there's a whole mix of things. And so I've actually kind of set up my life in the way that I almost wake up and know broadly what things I need to do and where I need to be kind of in physicality, and then carve my days around it. One thing that I've been really, really rigid about is having at least a day in the week where I have 0 meetings, online meetings, and that's been really important for me to actually get deep work done. And deep work is not as fancy as it sounds. It might be writing an article, it might be thinking through a new concept or idea, or drawing or designing, whatever it is, but you need space for that. And then I have also added, have a whole host of places all around the city and different things that I enjoy doing that I kind of connect. So a couple of weeks ago, I went to co-work with a friend in a climbing wall. So we worked in Pomodoros, we worked, and then as soon as the 5 minutes break came, we ran off and did a route, came back and kept working, and so forth, because climbing causes your forearms to get really, really kind of worked up. So it was a great kind of combination. I work in the beautiful RSA house sometimes. I work in the library. I work in cafes that I really enjoy. I work in all these different places, and I kind of realize that it's not work, and it's independent, and it's not your kind of personality or your energy level. It's it's all these things combined. Right? It's the task X, the space that you're occupying X, the headspace that you're in X, the kind of the people you're surrounded by, and X, the priority of the task. And so when you think of it like an equation like that, where all these factors matter equally, or if not equally, at least they all have a role to play, you start to make better decisions. And I'm not sure if it's not answer your question directly. I've kind of described more about how I've set up my working life so that actually it ensures that I am content and able to enjoy the different things that I do, while also making sure that things that need to get done are done.
I think that's answering Kim's question. She's nodding.
Yeah, it is. It's that kind of and it's that making peace with, this is actually what works for me. Yeah, it's a great answer.
Madeline.
I will keep it short, but I think that now working in a traditional work environment where I am in an office with, you know, a body in a chair. And I love my office. I love my colleagues. And I still have really long days because then I come home and then I work on GreenSpark and everything else that a regular person has to work on in their outside life. I miss so much that flexibility of being like, you know what, I really have a really productive Sunday and a super lazy Monday morning. And in a regular job, you don't have that as much. And obviously, when you're growing a company and you're building a team and you're scaling, you can feel like it's hard to carve that time out for yourself on any day, let alone a Monday. But I think we're very much echoing, I'm very much echoing, it's this listening to your body. If you're tired, taking a nap, working, you know, doing what you can to stay fresh and motivated instead of being in this rigid mentality of having to be at a desk during the working hours during the week. So I would just say taking advantage of it.
Okay, Sam, what's your answer?
I think there's a difference as well between the 3 first years and the last 2 years, probably. So combined 5 of how this has been for me. I will right away admit I'm horrible at this. Everything that Zubair is thinking is been on my mind, but has not worked out for me. And I can explain the reasons. And I think it's a lot of, there's a lot of, maybe there just will sound like excuses. But for me, it was a lot of, first was why no balance? Because I changed completely industries and I actually had to, I basically reinvented a job for myself. So I went from IT into environment and sustainability, which was not completely what I did before. So I felt very guilty, but as well very eager for knowledge. And Kim, just like you, learner is probably my number 2 or something like this. So actually there was no balance because I was enjoying it so much. So I was, you know, if I worked really hard, 10 hours a day, every day, because I was reading a lot of materials just to learn and to understand and kind of constantly ask myself, am I actually doing the right thing? And the learner was definitely impacting a lot my non-balance, but it was difficult to see because I was getting a lot of pleasure from doing it because I was constantly learning. And for me, because actually 5 years in, we're still pre-revenue, which is kind of completely ridiculous. I don't even know how I'm still alive. And in my mind, just psychologically, it meant every hour I'm not working is further away from us having money. So it's almost, it felt like if I don't put in the money, if I don't put in the time, the money will be even further. And so how long can I go? So it's almost like it was this vicious circle of, I have to put in the time, otherwise, yeah, I will wait even longer to actually be paid. So it was kind of those 2 things, the learner and the guilt of like not working means no money for myself. But I have to admit that I did one thing during that 5-year journey where I was like, actually, so I love sleep. And throughout my life, people have been mocking me about my sleep. So I am known amongst my friends as the one that always sleeps in. I love sleeping till 11, not anymore these days, but I used to. And I even had like nicknames, everything connected about people or animals that sleep. And there was one moment, like pivotal moment in my 5-year journey, and I don't remember, maybe it might have been in my 2nd year, where I actually told all my friends, can you please stop mocking me about this? Do you realize that I'm actually working, speaking and thinking in a language that's not my mother tongue, and maybe my brain needs a bit more time to just decompress and sleep, and I do need 10 or 12 hours to sleep to give my brain back the power. And my friends were like, okay, sorry. And now I can sleep as much as I want. Nobody's joking. And everyone's like, okay, just let Sam sleep in. So I'm proud of that. So that's where I carved out my little space. Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, so I'm horrible at it, but at least I found one thing that's for me. And maybe that as well has contributed to something that I feel like is beyond burnout at this point. So maybe that's one of the reasons why I need to just step back and relax for a while. So yeah.
Thank you, Sam. Zubair, I know you need to go, but you'll be able to listen to this on replay. Do you want to pop your question in there, and then you can leave and we can record the answers for you?
Oh, well, I kind of, I guess it was a little, it sounds like the interesting thing is that we're all now asking questions which are beyond the business and business things itself as well. And it's really interesting because, and I think very relevant as well, because at the end of the day, it's the operators, it's the founders, it's the things that we do as a human being that result in any of those kind of financial projections or this and that. And so it's fun that I'm seeing that. So my question was actually just going to be, what led you to pursue the purpose or the mission that your social enterprise stands for? And I think that there would be the lived experiences, and I was keen to hear those experiences from each of the attendees.
So we will answer that question, and I will make sure you get a copy of the recording.
Perfect.
And I do know you need to go.
So lovely to hear everyone. Thank you so much, and sorry for ducking out earlier.
Thank
Don't
you.
worry. Thank you for
Bye.
joining us.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so the question, how did I start with the mission? I think it was just always something I was interested in, not interested in, but I think like from a young age, very aware from my upbringing to be grateful for what I had and aware of what others didn't. And I actually started a charity when I was 13 years old. I had read a book about as an autobiography of someone that had gone through the foster system, and he didn't have family, and he didn't, he was bouncing around, and the only thing he had constant was this stuffed animal, this doggy. And I was just so touched by the book that I reached out to the author and asked if he would come to my school to speak. And then I asked the principal if she would make everyone read this book. So obviously everyone hated me because I was like, let's have everyone read this book and meet the author. And he came to the school and he spoke, and he was like 65 when he came, and he took out Doggy, this, his main best friend, his stuffed animal. And as I said before, I feel so grateful for this large family I have, and my community around me, even if it's virtual and I'm not living in the country that I grew up in. And so when I saw how much that Doggy meant to him, I then asked the school if they would let me do a school drive to collect stuffed animals. And then my cousin saw I was doing it and she wanted to do it. So she opened up a California chapter, and then the town overdid it. And it ended up like really organically growing. And I guess that would be 7th grade, 12 years old, like the first time of being able to like have an emotion and act on it, and then feel good about acting on it. And I think that was very much the beginning of what I've continued to try to do in different forms, let's say. But
Wow.
that's it.
Thank you. Sam.
So I think I only realized last year, so about 4 years into the journey, maybe more about the subconscious reasoning behind why I actually, from all the ideas I had, that's my dinner, from all the ideas I had, why exactly this one was the one that was kind of nudging me the most. And I know I mentioned it on the offline festival weekend, or the Saturday we had. I blame my mom. Because my mom is very like environmentally conscious, even though she's a doctor, so it has nothing to do with the environment really, not at least directly. And probably as well the environment and the culture I grew up, Latvia is very, very clean, and like seeing litter is literally like giving like an allergic reaction. So whenever I walk around UK, even if I leave the house, I always have a carrier bag and I would pick up litter. It's just something I just naturally do. So I think that's why it just kind of stuck with me when I saw the problem in Southeast Asia, and I was like, oh, we're gonna have to do something more than just litter picking here, because the problem is so much bigger. And the more I researched, the more I realized how big the problem really is, and how, yeah, the system is just wrong and nothing's working. And trying to bring something similar of what we're doing in the developed countries to that. But yeah, Thanks, mom. So whenever she, similar to Zubair, I can say my mom, even though she does as well, does not understand very often what I'm doing, has been very successful. But whenever she's like, oh, like, bless you, it's so hard. And I'm like, it's your fault. If I would have picked something else, it might have been so much easier. So yeah, moms, and subconsciously not realizing how our childhood actually does impact us. Hindsight is always better.
Thank you, Sam. And Kim?
I mean, I think I touched on it in my sort of introduction. It was just seeing that there's such a need. And I'd been working in private practice pretty much exclusively for 5 years. And there was some funding, actually, I think it is still available for children who have been adopted. And I was starting to see the social workers got my details, and I was seeing quite a few of the children that was receiving adoption support funding, and they are kids that I ordinarily would never have seen, because their families would never have been able to afford private therapy. And it really, like, I knew that there was a need there before that, but I think that really highlighted that need to me. And also just there were things changing within the main service provider at that point for training, where they doubled their fees pretty much overnight. And I just one thing I'd always valued was that their training was quite really affordable, and that meant people could access it. But it was just becoming, doubling overnight pretty much, which was not which made it, I think, less affordable. And I figured there was an easier way to provide the information, or at least a better way. I don't know if easier is the right description.
What would your questions be?
My question would be, if your company was wrapped up tomorrow, whatever that may be, an exit, an IPO, you're no longer there, you can decide what success story happens, would you do it again?
So Sam, you first.
Meaning, like, do
not the same business, not the same business. Would you be an entrepreneur again? And that's why I'm saying, like, for this purposes, we can say, you've had a nice exit and maybe you're a bit more, I don't know, comfortable. Maybe not, but would you do it again?
My answer, even if I had the worst ending, answer is 100% yes. But because I just know I've wanted to do my own thing, my own business since I was 21. So that's now 15 years ago. Oh my God, I feel so old. I just have so many ideas. But I think it's interesting that through this experience, and Zubair kind of touched, it will always be with you. And I'm currently in a very, very black hole. So lots of imposter syndrome and feeling like I'm just a massive failure and I'm never going to do anything great again ever in my life. But I'll crawl out of there eventually. But I came to realize as well that actually, and I did speak to Karen about it last week, that I started Ministry of Waste. I probably had very different needs. Like, I really wanted the challenge and I wanted to challenge myself. And I knew that I'm changing the industry. So there's like so much. And I wanted to actually prove it to myself that I can do it. It wasn't like proving it to anyone else, which I think is quite healthy, because like I don't care about what other people really think of me, really. So I'm sure I will do it again, but it has taught me that maybe this time I'm not going to do it on the other side of the planet, where I know that I actually want to stay living in UK. So I think my next adventure will be more home-based, maybe something, that maybe UK has problems with. There's plenty of problems in UK. And just picking the one that's closer to my heart. So let's see what the little black book of ideas brings me next. So stay tuned.
We will do that. So, thanks, Sam. Kim?
I would, but I wouldn't do it by myself, I think would be my answer to that. I would, I'm not sure I'd have the energy to do it completely alone again, but that is sitting now. But yeah, so I think I'd want a co-founder or a team. Yeah.
And Madeleine, if we put the same question to you.
She already has. She already has done
Yeah.
it.
But it's another
Well-
time, another time.
And I would as well. And I was hoping that these would be the answers, because when we've spoken on this panel of all of the challenges and the difficulties, that we leave on a kind of positive note that, yeah, it's super difficult, but it's also super rewarding to be able to take action and create impact and build something. So I hope that that's a last little nugget to end on a positive note.